Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel, Neri the Coder. Today we are going to be talking about JavaScript introduction. We're going to be talking about what is JavaScript and how can it make your websites or web pages more interactive. So yeah, let's dive into the course. So what is JavaScript? Initially, JavaScript was called LiveScript, and it was basically created to make your web pages live or interactive. So, but what this mean is, if you have already worked with HTML, you would know that we can just only create static websites with that, and we cannot really interact with that. So, for that reason, the JavaScript was created to make the websites more interactive. For example, to change the data on a website over a certain period of time or over a certain event and make it more interactive. The programs in this language are called scripts. The code that we write in JavaScript is called scripts. They can be written right in the web page HTML and run automatically as a page load. So you don't need to worry about saving it and then running it or doing some kind of stuff like that. You just have to write the code, save it, and then open the browser. It will just run in the browser. So it is executed as a plain text. No need for special preparation and compilation to run. Java was very popular when JavaScript was created, so it was decided that positioning a new language as a younger brother to Java would help. Later on, it became a fully independent language with its own specification called ECMAScript that we are going to be talking about later. And it executes, JavaScript executes on the browsers, it executes on servers as well, and even devices that has special programs called JavaScript engine. So any device or machine that has this JavaScript engine installed, then it will have a support for JavaScript. And browser has it has its own embedded engine called the JavaScript virtual machine, and we call it V8 and Chrome, Opera, and Edge. And Firefox, we call this JVM or JavaScript Virtual Machine, a Spider Monkey. We call it Chakra for Internet Explorer. So yeah, we are going to be talking about how do the engines really work. So the engine is embedded in the browser. If it's a browser, then it reads and parses the script. Then it converts or compiles the script to the machine language, and then the machine code runs pretty fast. So by machine, I mean your laptop or your desktop machine or computer that will just run your code. But that compilation or interpretation is done by the browser itself. You don't need a separate compiler for your JavaScript code, or you don't need an integrated development environment for that we're going to be talking about in the next slides. So depend on the environment it is running in. For example, in Node.js, it supports functions that allow JavaScript to read and write arbitrary files and perform network requests. And in browser, it can do HTML, for example, adding HTML to page or changing the existing content to modify styles. So we're just talking about what we can do with JavaScript in the browser, and it will react to events, for example, mouse clicks or pointer movements and key presses. It can send requests to remote servers, and download and upload files via Ajax that we'll talk about later on. But for now, we can just think about, what JavaScript is capable of and what it can really do in the browser itself. It can get and set cookies, storing the data on the client side or in the browser itself. What it cannot do or what doesn't do, it does not provide low-level access to the memory or CPU since it was created for browser. So just for safety purpose, when someone have a Chrome or any browser installed, it doesn't give you any low-level access to the CPU of the machine so that you can manipulate or play along with that. No direct access to the operating system functions, and all the time if your program or your code is using the microphone or webcam or something like that, it will explicitly ask for user permission to interact with the webcam and microphone. And it has the same origin policy by default. For example, you can only make requests from one domain to another, and you cannot make a request, for example, from www.facebook.com to www.google.com. So that's a cross-origin request. And also, tabs or windows generally do not know about each other in the browser. So, for example, if you have some different tabs and or windows open in the browser, so they're isolated. You cannot communicate unless agreed and set up for that exchange with special JavaScript code, unless that script is written within the application to communicate between different pages. So they're kind of isolated. What makes JavaScript unique? What is so unique about JavaScript? So as for if you have prior knowledge to any other programming languages like C++ or Java or any language, so they are not fully integrated or they have no integration with HTML and CSS. But with JavaScript, you can manipulate HTML, CSS in your web page. It has full integration with those. Simple things are done very simply, supported by all major browsers and are enabled by default. JavaScript is the only browser technology that combines these three things. Integration with HTML, CSS. You can do things very simply, and support for the browser. That's what makes JavaScript unique. That's why it's the most widespread tool for creating browser interfaces. Let's talk about the code editors. So code editor is basically the place where programmers spend most of their time. Yeah, of course. So if you're going to be writing your code, so of course you're not going to be writing your code directly in the browser or something like that. You'll be using some kind of code editor or integrated development environment, which is called IDE. So integrated development environment is a full-scale development environment, and it has integrated features like compilers and interpreters and all that cool stuff. Just like for example, you can talk about Visual Studio. It's a fully integrated environment, and the WebStorm for web development. We also have lightweight editors, just like we have a notepad editor in a Windows machine or any other machines. So just like that, we have another code editors. They're fast, elegant, and simple. So for a few examples, we will talk about Atom, Sublime Text, Notepad++, Visual Studio Code. These are really simple and cool and fast editors for writing your code. Since we don't need any compilers or any integrated development environment for our JavaScript code, so we're going to be using one of these program code editors. Personally, I use Visual Studio Code, but it's up to everyone's preference what they like the most. How do we do debugging in JavaScript? So of course, code is prone to errors. You'll quite likely make errors. If you write your JavaScript code, you will likely be making some errors. Users don't see errors by default. If something goes wrong in a script, since we're going to be running it in the browser, we can open the developer tool that is embedded in the browser. To see errors and get a lot of other useful information about scripts, developer tools have been embedded in the browser tool. So yeah, let's just see it practically what we mean by that. So if I go to my browser, you can see that I have the google.com open by default. And if I right click on any place on the window and click on the inspect button over here, you will see another window open within the browser that is called a debugging console, or debugger console. You can write your JavaScript code over here as well. You can see a lot of different things like elements on this page, which is the HTML of this page. You can see different sources, the files and all that. You can see the network tab, how we are making requests to the server, performance, memory, application, Real Explorer, some of them throughout the course. So this is what we call a developer console that is embedded into any browser. So I'm using Chrome. I like this developer console. Most of sometimes people use Firefox and other cool browsers. It's totally up to you. Most developers lean toward Chrome and Firefox for development because those browsers have the best developer tools that I just shown you. And yeah, that's the end of this course. So it's totally up to you. How do you go through the code editor and which browser do you like? Just make sure you have everything ready for this course. So to download the Visual Studio Code, you just have to go open your browser and just type Visual Studio Code, and you'll see the first link here, and just download it for your machine. I'm using Mac, so I have already installed it. And for if you're using or on Windows or Linux operating system, then just install it for your use case. Yeah, that should be, I think, it. And once installed, you will just see something like this. You can open it and get started, and you have something similar like this. So yeah, I hope you have learned something new in this video. Please like and share the video, subscribe to the channel, and make sure to press the bell icon for future updates. And until then, I'll see you in the next lecture.